Hey guys, today I have a how-to video for you. I'm going to be giving you specific information on how to set up, tie, and fish with a three-way fly rig. I had quite a few questions specific to what I was using and how I set it up on the video I posted recently when we were catching the walleyes and white bass on this setup. So I figured I'd make a video for you guys out there to hopefully help you and show you specifically how I set up and tie my three-way rigs, and it's been very successful for me. So we'll get into that and then specific situations on where they can be very effective and usually where I do well with them. So we'll get into it in a second here. So typically the best places and the most effective places to use fly with a three-way setup is going to be where there's current. So rivers, flowages, places like that, and this is specific to walleyes and white bass. So when you're in that current, what happens is that fly is fluttering around, and that's why that current is so important. It keeps that fly from tangling as well. So I wouldn't recommend using this on a lake or something like that where there isn't current. I don't think you're going to have too great a success. It's really mainly for those current areas in rivers and flowages. But it can be a great tool when the white bass are coming up to spawn, when the walleyes are coming up to spawn. Even the crappies will hit these things, perch. They're pretty versatile on what they can be used for. But mainly in this video I'm going to be talking about how to use them for walleyes and white bass in the rivers and flowages. I'm going to start by showing you my go-to setup for white bass. So we'll get it on the screen here. So I tie a series of 3 flies. I got one in my left hand and then the other one in my right hand here. Okay, so there we go. See if we can get it on the screen for you. There we go. So start with the first fly on the end. That's just a purple fly here. And then I got the middle one here, which is dangling around in the middle of the screen right now. That's a pink fly. And then I got another purple fly up front. So kind of see how those all come together in a line there. And then that all goes up another maybe 2 feet to the three-way. Okay, so that's the three-way swivel there that you can see. Alright, so I don't have my main line attached obviously, but where it would be attached, I'm holding my finger here, and then that would go down to the weight, which I got a snap swivel on where that bell sinker is. Okay, I'll slowly pull this back and kind of see the whole deal here. Okay, so that's how that all comes together. So I'm going to go through with you guys step by step on how to tie this baby up. I'm going to show you guys a couple of quick clips of this white bass setup in action before we dive into the setup of it. This one feels like a white bass. I was right, and it's a pretty good one. Not a bad white bass. On the middle fly again, on the pink one here. See that I had a tip of the minnow. Biggest one of the day, I think. Oh yeah, that's a big white bass. Another one, doubler. Oh yeah. Nice white bass. That's a good fish right there. Good eating fish right there. Starting with the flies, I use anywhere from 1.5 inch to 2 inch long fly. They're kind of tied with like this yarn material. So this is a blue and white one. They're all single hook, the ones that I use, and they seem to work quite well for anything that I'm fishing for: white bass, walleye, panfish. So they make them in a ton of different colors, patterns. The pinks, the purples are very good. The greens, chartreuse, stuff like that. It doesn't seem to matter. Some days, other days it can make a big difference. This is one that I bought at Fleet Farm Fleet Farm carries these in the spring of the year, so these have worked well for me too. These are a little bit bigger, but any bait shop around a lot of the rivers and stuff, they'll tie them up and they'll have a whole assortment. You can buy them online. Guys tie them up and sell them, so there's a lot of options out there for flies. Start out with about 6 feet of line. I use 8-pound Berkeley fluorocarbon called Vanish. You can use mono if you want to. Fluorocarbon's a little bit more clear underwater. That's what I prefer to use. I would recommend using a range from 6 to 10 pounds. I wouldn't use anything heavier than 10 just because of the visibility. The fish may be a little bit more reluctant to bite with the heavier line. And I wouldn't recommend using lighter than 6 because if you do get hung up on any kind of snag or anything on the bottom, it's going to snap off really easily. So I use 8, which is right in the middle. So you want to take about 6 feet, just about a wingspan's length for me. Alright, so we're going to cut that off. What I do is I spool up a lot of my rods with this line, so I usually have some left over that doesn't fit on the reel. Works out pretty good having for this type of stuff. So my first fly is the first thing I'm going to tie on here, and I'm just going to do a regular Palomar knot, which is one of the most common fishing knots. It's one where you loop it through, twist it 8 to 12 times, and then put it in the loop, and then back through the loop that makes. Okay, there's a bunch of videos on how to tie these knots out there, on how to tie the Palomar knot. So see there, I got that first one tied on there. I'm going to trim that little bit of excess, and then I'm going to move on to the next one here. Knot for the next one is called a Snell knot. So we got to find the other end here that doesn't have anything on it. Okay, so we got that here, and we're going to loop that right through our next fly. Okay, we're going to slide that down, and I usually go about 12 to 14 inches or so, okay, from my back fly. So I'm going to say that's probably about a foot or so where I got that right now. Then I'm going to tie the Snell knot. So again, there's a ton of videos out on YouTube on how to tie the Snell knot, but essentially you twist it around the shaft of the hook and fly here a bunch of times, and then loop it back through after twisting it, and it'll kind of cinch that up on there. It's a great knot for oops, I'm looped around here. Great knot for inline hooks and flies, things like this. Works great for crawler harnesses as well. Alright, so pull that good and tight. So we got our first 2 flies good to go. Okay, then the third and final fly will be the exact same way as the last one. Find the top of our line here. Okay, we're going to loop her through. Okay, and I'm going to go probably about a foot again. Right about a foot. Okay, got it looped around. Come on. It's kind of tricky, you got to pinch it with your finger. Alright, I got that pulled through. Okay, so there is our 3 flies. Okay. Alright, now that we got our flies ready to go, it is time for our 3-way swivel. So you can see that there that I'm holding my finger. They make them in all kinds of different sizes and weight ratings. This is a bigger one that I use just so you guys can see a little bit easier. So I got my 3 flies here, and I am going to tie the front end of that line onto one of the 3 swivel sections on the 3-way here. just a regular Palomar knot on here again. Okay, so we got that on there. Trim a little excess again. Okay, so we are attached to our 3-way now with our whole 3-fly rig here. Now I am going to tie on the portion that goes to the weight. So for this, I use a 20-pound. This is trilene, just regular monofilament. You can use fluorocarbon too, but the reason I use heavier line for this is what's mostly bouncing off the bottom. If anything's going to get stuck, this is likely going to be it. So I use the heavier line, hoping that if I do get into something, I won't snap my line trying to get out, because this whole setup, as you guys can see, takes a long time to tie up. So I use 20-pound test. You could use braid, but in my experience, that cuts a little bit easier than what this heavier mono works. So any heavier line that you got will work. You can use regular 8-pound or 6-pound test line, but your chances of snapping this thing off are going to be a lot greater. A Palomar knot again on this. So tying that right on here. Now this I usually go, I want to say probably like 10 inches or so. So I want to leave myself a little bit extra for the knot. It's going to be another Palomar knot. Now this I am going to tie on a snap swivel. And of course I don't have one ready here. Alright, so I got my snap swivel. Really any swivel will work. Just got to be able to snap on and off a weight. So we're going to tie that on to that 10-inch bottom weight line. So again, a Palomar knot, like I said. Working on that right now. Alright. So now we got our flies tied off of one direction, and then our swivel here where our weight will be down. Okay. The reason I tie a snap swivel on the bottom end of this is, one, you can change out that weight. Okay, so right now this is like a 1/2 ounce weight. Okay. And the reason that you might want to be doing that is if you're fishing a river, there's areas that have more current than others. Maybe you want to try anchoring. Maybe you want to try trolling into the current. And all those different situations are going to require different weights. You want to use a weight that allows you to get to the bottom on like a 45-degree angle, and you could just bounce it off the bottom, and every time the current will take it back. If you have too heavy a weight, the current isn't going to take that, and you're going to get slack in your line. And if you have too light of weight, you're not going to be able to stay on the bottom on that 45-degree angle. So you want to find a weight and use a weight that you're able to kind of maintain that perfect balance where that thing will just keep bouncing back, and you don't have to reel or let out line to do that once you're at that 45-degree angle. So we're spot locked here, and got a 1 3/4 ounce bell sinker on, and I got 3 flies tied off a 3-way swivel, and we're in about 20 feet of water, and we're just kind of popping this thing, as you can see, and that's how we're getting these fish to bite. So really the last step here, guys, now is just to tie this final end off the swivel here, the third and final end, to your main line. So I use a medium rod for this. The reason being is you really don't have to feel that bite. The fish pretty much hook themselves when you're using this setup. And when you are fighting a big 2-ounce sinker or whatever you're using against the current, and you get a fish on there, it is quite a bit of force. So that's where that heavier rod comes in handy. You can really fight those fish a little bit, where if you had a medium light or a ultralight or something, it would just be way too much with the current and with the fish weight on there. So that's what I use, and I use my braided rods. You can use, again, any line, any rod, any weight, whatever. The heavier the better, in my opinion, for this. And that's why I use my braided rods, which are a 30-pound braid, because again, it sucks when you snap this off. This takes a long time to tie all this stuff up. You do not want to snap off the whole setup. So at least if you got heavy line to your three-way, worst case scenario, you might snap off a fly or the fly end of it, because that's where we got the lighter line. But the rest of it should still be there, so at least it saves you half the time. But that's the reason I use braid, is just for the sheer fact that it's on my heavier rods and I don't want to snap it off. Try to get the whole thing on the camera here for you guys. So you can see my farthest fly there to the right. I got my middle one here, next guy here, three-way, down to the snap, swivel, and weight there. Okay, so that is the finished product. So the other reason I use a snap swivel where the weight goes there off the three-way is if I'm fishing for walleyes, I'll actually put a jig on here, okay? And I have a couple video clips of catching fish on this jig. But the one thing you got to keep in mind, guys, is right now I technically have 4 lines because I still got my 3 flies here. So if you choose to do this as your weight, which this is a 1 ounce jig, and it, like I said, this can work great. Usually when I'm setting up for walleyes versus white bass, I'm going to tie 2 flies or maybe 1 fly and a bare hook with this 1 ounce weight. But you can only have 3 separate baits on here legally in Wisconsin. So if I want to put this jig on this exact setup, I'm going to have to cut off one of these flies to be legal. Okay. So, but that's the other benefit. I can snap that on and off if I want. And then the other thing that I didn't mention is when you're done fishing for the day, whatever, the last thing you want bouncing around the side of your boat and on your other rods and tangling stuff up is a big bell sinker. So you can snap that off and then just clip this swivel to one of your eyelids on your rod until the next time you go fishing.
No, it's good. I'm looking, it came on the jig. I've had a bite on all 3 now. Hey, it works. So this guy went for the big jig, little walleye, and then I got fly in the middle, just the hook in the middle and the back. I've had a hit on everything. This one might be a throwback. Oh, that's a nice one. That is a nice one. That one's gonna go back in the water. Nice female. On the jig again. Nice. Nice big ol' walleye right there. This one's gonna get put back to do her thing. She's full of eggs.
I had no idea I could talk about flies this long, but definitely a lot of good information for you guys. So I want to make a few final points. The main difference between my white bass setup and walleye setup is the white bass setup I'm running 3 flies with a bell sinker. The walleye setup I'm running 2 flies with a jig as my sinker. A hook and a jig replaces the sinker. I'm usually running some type of plastic on that jig, just because then you don't have to worry about losing the minnow with that thing bouncing off the bottom so much. Once in a while too with the walleye setup, I'll only put 1 fly on and a bare hook with that jig. Just makes it a little bit more versatile, and you can see what the fish want on those days. The other thing I didn't mention is a lot of times I will tip the flies with minnows. Usually when the water's cooler or certain days when the fish are finicky, it can make a huge difference tipping those flies with minnows. Other days when they're really on fire, it doesn't matter what you do. You're going to catch fish and you don't have to bother tipping the flies with the minnows. So it really depends on the day and the temperature of the water for that. And as far as, ways and where to use this thing, you can spot lock or anchor. That's probably the easiest way. And like I said, you drop that thing down there, find bottom, and then try to keep that 45-degree angle with the proper weight. You can also slowly pull yourself into the current with a bow mount or your kicker motor, whatever you got, or even your big motor, just enough that you're moving into the current. You can zigzag or go straight into the current And again, keep popping that jig as you pull yourself into the current. That is effective as well. The benefit to that is you're covering ground. So if you're not in a great spot, you might go through some areas. And if you do find an area where you always are picking up fish, maybe you try anchor in there. But really, it's a great tool, specifically usually deeper water, 15 to 25 feet. But I've caught a ton of walleye and white bass on various systems in the state of Wisconsin. So it's a great tool. Hopefully this video is helpful for you guys, and good luck if you're trying this out there. And just appreciate you guys watching.